Hey there again. Welcome back to Kinfolk Chat with Swarthy Daisy. In this video, I wanted to take a look at my Native American ancestry, the little tiny bit that I have. We're going to break that down and dissect it, but we're also going to look at something very interesting that I found when I was doing research. Taking a look here at my 23andMe account, we see that when we expand to see all of the tested populations, they show here under the Indigenous American section, they have Colombian, Caritiana, Maya, Pima, Sururi, and Guatemalan samples. And over here at AncestryDNA for the Americas, they have Indigenous Americas North, but you see they don't have any regions listed. So as we see, if you're looking to verify Native American ancestry within all of the Americas, then you'll definitely be able to get results from these companies. If you're looking at North America, it's a bit of a different story. This excerpt from medium.com states that currently the largest genetic databases against which all DNA tests are evaluated and matched according to patterns in various geographic populations consists of roughly 700,000 individuals, virtually none of whom are indigenous to the United States and Canada. The only statistically significant and thus easily matched genetic data from Indigenous American populations currently comes from Mayan, Peruvian, and Amazonian peoples. The article goes on to say, as such, it is entirely possible that the results of a person who is fully Lakota or even Lumbee or Cherokee with no other ethnic admixture might come back as European, Middle Eastern, or Central Asian because 90% of the markers were in a similar position to those groups or in a genetic test with higher specificity. The individual's results might simply show as unknown origin. Considering what we just read, let's look at some possibilities. Here on Family Tree DNA are my brother and mom's results. As you see, my brother has Magyar at 6% and my mother has it at 4%. Hungarians, also known as Magyars Hungarian, Magyarok, are a nation and ethnic group native to Hungary and historical Hungarian lands who share a common culture, history, ancestry, and language. The Hungarian language belongs to the Uralic language family. The Uralic languages, sometimes called Uralian languages, form a language family of 38 languages spoken by approximately 25 million people, predominantly in northern Eurasia. The Uralic languages with the most native speakers are Hungarian, which alone accounts for more than half of the family speakers, Finnish, and Estonian. Other significant languages with fewer speakers are Erzya, Maksha, Mari, Udmurt, Sami, Komi, and Vepsian, all of which are spoken in northern regions of Scandinavia and the Russian Federation. Here are my wheat gene results, and as you see here on the left, Hungarian is showing up as 3.31%, and on the right, Native American at 0.34%. One of the calculators on your DNA portal shows Viking, Finnish, Gotland at 3%. Vikings is the modern name given to seafaring people primarily from Scandinavia, present-day Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, who from the 8th to the late 11th centuries raided, pirated, traded, and settled throughout parts of Europe. They also voyaged as far as the Mediterranean, North Africa, the Middle East, and North America. Finns or Finnish people are a Baltic Finnish ethnic group native to Finland. Finns are traditionally divided into smaller regional groups that span several countries adjacent to Finland, both those who are native to these countries as well as those who have resettled. Some of these may be classified as separate ethnic groups rather than subgroups of Finns. These include the Finns and Forest Finns in Norway, the Tornedalians in Sweden, and the Ingrian Finns in Russia. Gotland is Sweden's largest island. It is also a province, county, municipality, and diocese. Another calculation shows Norrland. Norrland is the northernmost, largest, and least populated of the 3 traditional islands of Sweden, consisting of 9 provinces. Ural-Finnish, 4%. The 3 most spoken Uralic languages, Hungarian, Finnish, and Estonian, are all included in the Finno-Ugric, although linguistic roots common to both branches of the traditional Finno-Ugric language tree are distant. The term Finno-Ugric, which originally referred to the entire family, is sometimes used as a synonym for the term Uralic, which includes Samoyedic languages. Here we see Finno-Ugric Urals and Finnish Karelian. Karelia was a historical province of Finland, which Finland partly ceded to the Soviet Union after the Winter War of 1939-1940. The Russians are an East Slavic ethnic group native to Eastern Europe who share a common Russian ancestry, culture, and history. Russian, the most spoken Slavic language, is the shared mother tongue of the Russians. Genetically, the majority of Russian populations are identical to the other East and West Slavs. Only in the North Russian populations is it noted that they belong to the North European Baltic gene pool. The name of the Russians derives from the early medieval Rus people, a group of Norse merchants and warriors who relocated from across the Baltic Sea and founded a state centered on Novgorod that later became Kievan Rus. From the 7th century onwards, the East Slavs constituted the bulk of the population in Western Russia, and according to some scholars, slowly but peacefully assimilated the native Finnic peoples. The traditional start date of specifically Russian history is the establishment of the Rus state in the north in 862, ruled by Vikings. Staria, Ladoga, and Novgorod became the first major cities of the new union of immigrants from Scandinavia with the Slavs and Finns. Another calculator shows Russia, Erzia. Another calculator shows Ural-Ugro-Finnic. And then here on illustrative DNA, if we use the Americas and Latin America calculator, you see that they have a very good fit, and it shows there's some Baltic DNA. They also show South Amerindian and Aleut or Aleut. The South Amerindian is 0.4% and Aleut is 0.2%. In summary, the South Amerindian is shown as the South American southern Chile area, and the descendants of the first inhabitants would become the indigenous populations of South America, and that's before the Spanish colonization of the Americas. The Paleo-Aleut here. In summary, it shows that they arrived in the Aleutian Islands from the Alaskan mainland a few thousand years ago, and they're members of a people inhabiting the Aleutian Islands, other islands in the Bering Sea, and parts of western Alaska. The language of the Aleuts, distantly related to the Yupik and Inuit, are almost now extinct. Looking back here at my AncestryDNA, we see that I have Baltic, 1%. And again, we see its connection with Russia. And again, as we saw earlier, we see that the Baltic is also on my illustrative DNA results. Even though the term Indian generally does not include the culturally and linguistically distinct indigenous peoples of the Arctic regions of the Americas, such as the Aleuts, Inuit, or Yupik peoples, who entered the continent as a second, more recent wave of migration several thousand years later, and have much more recent genetic and cultural commonalities with the Aboriginal peoples of the Asiatic, Arctic, Russian, Far East. These groups are nonetheless considered indigenous peoples of the Americas. Most Amerindian groups are derived from two ancestral lineages, which formed in Siberia prior to the last glacial maximum between about 36,000 and 25,000 years ago, East Eurasian and ancient North Eurasian. They later dispersed throughout the Americas after about 16,000 years ago, exceptions being the Nadini and Eskimo Aleut-speaking groups, which are partially derived from Siberian populations which entered the Americas at a later time. My 24 genetics results highlights regions in Russia. They show several areas which add up to about 3.0%. This Ancestry.com article highlights that many people carry DNA from multiple Native American tribes as well as non-Indigenous DNA. This can make it difficult to accurately distinguish between different Native American tribes. Also, many Native Americans have some European ancestors. Ancestry selects only the parts of a person's genome that we identify as being Native American, so we essentially stitch together small sections of indigenous DNA to reconstruct bigger genomes. This RBTH.com article highlights some of the DNA samples that they had in their biobank looking at Russian DNA. Then they conclude, as a result, scientists prove beyond a doubt that Native Americans are closely related to the peoples of Altai. Altai is a republic of Russia located in southern Siberia. It is a part of the Siberian Federal District. Besides Siberian ancestors, some Native Americans showed a puzzling relation to the indigenous peoples of Australia and Melanesia in the Pacific Ocean. And of course, here's another possibility. My WeGene result shows Oceanian and Papuan. Considering what we have so far, it's time to put more pieces together. As I shared in previous videos, my mother's line has roots in North Carolina, and according to some of the DNA results that I've received from various companies, they show Lumbee repeatedly. So the Lumbee are descendants of a mix of Siouan, Algonquin, and Iroquoian speaking peoples who in the 1700s settled in the swamps along the Lumbee River in southeast North Carolina, intermarrying with whites and with blacks, both free and enslaved. Today, many live in Robeson County, North Carolina. And as shared before, here on my Ancestry DNA, we see that one of my communities is early North Carolina African Americans. As mentioned, my great-grandmother's family has roots in North Carolina. They lived in Georgia, and she spent time living and working in Eufaula, Alabama. She also had family living there at the time. She moved back to Georgia and lived in the Chattahoochee River area. Here we see that the Creek Nation is comprised of 6 political districts. One includes Eufaula. The Eufaula people were a tribe of Native Americans in the United States located in the southeast. A Muskogean-speaking people, they possibly broke off from the Kialegi or Hilibi tribe. They were part of the Muskogee Creek Confederacy. Some Eufaula lived along the Chattahoochee River in what became the state of Georgia. The Lower Creek Eufaula settled there by 1733, and quite possibly earlier than that. And going back to the Medium.com article, it says, I discovered that of the 944 Lumbee males whose Y chromosomes were tested overall, 547 of them showed a result which came back as unknown origin, meaning that these genetic markers could not be matched to any European, African, or other populations accounted for within the database. So again, on the right from 23andMe, my unassigned DNA at 0.3%. And again, the Medium.com article that we kind of talked about earlier, again, highlights how the statistically significant genetic data from Indigenous American population currently comes from Mayan, Peruvian, and Amazonian peoples. Very few indigenous groups have submitted their DNA to these databases, meaning that the genetic profiles, which most scientists agree are very regionally diverse, have not been mapped for most North American people. Thus, these tests, which seek to match haplotypes and SNPs of indigenous peoples without Mayan, Peruvian, or Amazonian ancestry, will frequently return with the results showing unknown origin. DNAconsultants.com highlights that the Lumbee are composed of distinct elements of various groups, including Cherokee and other Indian groups of the Carolinas of both Algonquin and Siouan groups. An excerpt from Quora.com states that Lumbee DNA reflects a population that is, on average, predominantly European, a smaller but significant level of sub-Saharan African, and a dash of Native American. DNAconsultants.com also highlights that if you have a match, you probably also have Jewish and Native American ancestry and possibly sub-Saharan African. You may also be prone to Jewish and Mediterranean genetic disorders, including anemias, fibromyalgia, and familial Mediterranean fever. Here is one of my results from 23andMe Health, and it shows G6PD deficiency. G6PD deficiency is the most common genetic cause of chronic and drug, food, or infection-induced hemolytic anemia. I also had the experience of my Native American DNA on 23andMe changing to North African DNA. When asked, I was told that I could see changing DNA results from update to update due to a process called recombination. Recombination is a process by which pieces of DNA are broken and recombined to produce new combinations of alleles. This recombination process creates genetic diversity at a level of genes that reflects differences in the DNA sequences of different organisms. So now that we've covered many research possibilities for finding Native American DNA and perhaps answering why you don't see Native American DNA in your test results, we still have to do more research. Of course, as I've stated in other videos, I'm not a geneticist, I'm not a genealogist, I'm a consumer just like you are. So what I did in this video was to try to put pieces together and utilize different platforms to answer different questions that we might have. If nothing else, perhaps you can use my strategy to find your own Native American DNA. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like. Also, if you have any comments that you would like to leave about the research, am I on the right track? Am I totally off? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, make sure to subscribe if you're not subscribed to my channel, and feel free to share this video with others. Once again, this is Kinfolk Chat. I'm Swarthy Daisy. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.